Hi, I'm Baldur, and this is the Conducting Coaching Podcast, where we talk about conducting from the inside. I'm just back from the Lucerne Festival Academy Contemporary Conducting Program. We had 4 young conductors on the program this year, 4 super talented young maestras and maestros. And apart from all the practical work, the rehearsals, the concerts and so on, we discussed a lot of issues around conducting and around conducting careers, the next steps to take and so on. And one subject that came up quite a lot was agents. So I thought I'd make my first ever podcast about agents, sharing some information and looking at what agents are, what they can do for you, how to get signed by an agent and so on. This is a big subject, but let's start with looking at what agents are and what they do, what their position in the music business is, how they work, what their business model is. Then we'll look at a few of the agencies around, some of the bigger ones, some smaller ones. Fundamentally, agencies that represent conductors and that might be interesting for you at some stage of your careers. Then we look at what an agent can do for you, if you need an agent and for what you need an agent. And then we'll talk also a little bit about choosing the right agent. You know what you have to look out for and how you find your way in that big sea of agents that are around. Now let's start with the basics. Agents are representing artists. Artists like conductors, but also soloists and sometimes composers. Agents or artist managers usually work for agencies that employ various agents according to the company size, that each represent a couple of artists. There are agencies around that don't do just musicians. Sometimes they represent sports stars, politicians and so on. But fundamentally they represent you and they are the link between you and the music business. They will do a lot of networking for you. They will have experience with career building, will know the music business and can help with practical issues like contracts, fees, paperwork and sometimes legal questions. An agent ideally will learn about his or her artists, what everybody's specialties are, like the kind of personality, the kind of things somebody is good at or not good at, and then go to the people in the music business talking about you and trying to get you in touch with the people who are likely to book you for projects or jobs. So it's basically about building a network, helping to build your name and your career, and trying to get you as much work as they can. For that service, you pay them a commission, which usually comes out of your fee. That can be like 10, 15 or 20% and so on, according to your agreement you have with the agency. Some agencies I've heard of charge something upfront to cover the initial costs of getting your name known, a website built, printing promotional material and so on. But most of the bigger agencies usually simply charge a commission. And if they do anything extra that is not within your contract with them, you might have to pay extra. Bigger agencies often don't do just artist representation, but they are also involved in touring, in special projects, sometimes really anything, film music, crossover, anything that somebody in the classical music business would be likely to program. Now, your relationship with an agent is defined by a contract. In the contract, you specify what your obligations are and what the agent's obligations are, what your financial agreement is, and basically what your relationship is going to look like. We'll come back to that later, because I think I have to get a bit more into detail in terms of contracts. But for now, let's just leave it here. The contract is there to establish your professional relationship with your representative. When we look at what sort of agencies represent conductors, the bigger agencies mostly are in London and New York. I would say people like Harrison Parrott, Askenas Holt, IMG, Opus 3, Intermusica, and maybe some others like Katie Schmid in Germany or in some agencies in Paris. They're the bigger players in the field. Then there are some medium-sized agencies which sometimes specialize in either singers or conductors or in a musical genre within classical music. And then there are small agencies. that have just a few artists, boutique agencies or young startups. Some boutique managers started because, artist managers from bigger companies set up on their own and took some of the clients with them. Or after COVID, when a lot of the bigger agencies were in trouble, some smaller agencies with just a few artists started out. Then you also have agencies that just operate on a national level. So they represent international artists in one particular country. Japan Arts, for example, in Japan, or Ibermusica in Spain. And most of all the artist managing companies are organized in the IAMA, the International Artists Manager Association. The website of IAMA has a list with all their members, so there you can find most of the agencies that are around worldwide. Now, what can an agent do for you? And do you actually need an agent? This is usually quite a big question, especially for young conductors, because an agent can make a big difference to your career. So let's have a look at this. First of all, you have to look at what your career goals are. There are lots of conducting jobs that don't really need agents. There are staff positions, for example, full-time positions like in many German opera houses. There are university positions. There are other fields of conducting like choirs, wind bands, youth orchestras. There are many sort of conducting paths out there. And also within professional orchestral conducting, there are conductors who don't get booked via agents. So the first question to ask yourselves is, in my sort of career plan, can an agent really be helpful or not? Agents usually work in the professional, international classical music scene, and they mostly operate in the freelance world, where there's an international field of conductors and an international field of promoters and orchestras. You have to ask yourself, what sort of value can an agent add to my career? Because some of you will have a circle where you operate in, and you have a certain working life that works for you. But it's just really useful to have an agent if you either want to expand on that, widen your network, or if you want to sort of outsource certain types of work to an agent. Can an agent add value to your conducting career? Can they open up new doors? Can they get you more work and so on? From my point of view, if you want to be a professional conductor, being on an agent's list is pretty important. Because agents are often seen as a quality stamp for a young artist. It shows that somebody with experience in the field really trusts in you. Most artistic directors or programmers have agents in whose judgment they really trust and who they will go to when they look at new young conductors. Having a good agent makes you pass through a certain first filter and puts you on the radar of certain organizations who otherwise would probably not know who you are. For you, the first step of looking at the whole agents question would be to give yourself a clearer idea who's out there. Looking at the agencies and who they have on their lists. See what the focus of each agency is. See what the balance between older and young conductors is, between female and male conductors, and just sort of gather the whole artistic vibe that comes out of a certain agency. In the end, the company is important, the company that represents you, but what is more important is the individual manager you work with. The company gives you the size of the canvas the agent can work on because they bring the contacts and the knowledge, but you and the individual agent will have to do the painting. Your personal manager is your first and most important point of contact. With that person, you will have to have a close relationship because sometimes you have to have pretty intimate conversations, like they have to give you good or bad feedback. They have to tell you things like how you're perceived from the outside world, and you'll have to get them a bit of access to your inner world and to who you are and to who you are as an artist. This is important because in order for the agent to represent you really well to the outside world. So it's important that this is somebody who you really trust. From the outside, I feel really quickly if an agent fundamentally knows and believes in a conductor. So I think that aspect is definitely something you'll have to look at when you're choosing the right agent for you. The agents should always be interested in who you are as an artist and as a person. And instinct here, I think, plays a big role. Now, let's assume you did your homework. You looked at the agents and their lists, you looked at the ins and outs of the music business, and you feel you're ready for getting representation. Now, the next big question is how to get an agency to sign you up. This is one of the points we'll talk about in the next episodes of the Conducting Coaching podcast. I'll go through the whole process of working with an agent in detail, like the contract and all the details and how this relationship works. And then, of course, we have to look at how you become or can become interesting for an agent, how they go about looking for new conductors to sign up. The first thing here will be to talk to a real agent, Leila Güneş from Intermusica. She has a lot of experience and she can give you some insight into what all this looks like from the agent's business side. How they look at young conductors, how they build careers, and how they manage their relationships, and so on. From my side, I'll share as much information as I can, because the more information you have, the more you will be able to take informed decisions about your career. Knowledge is power, and this is the main point of the Conducting Coaching podcast, really.
Thanks for listening. To send us your comments or suggestions, please write us a message on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date with all the Conducting Coaching news and events.